It began on an evening that felt ordinary, but in hindsight was anything but. The curtains were drawn before sunset, the living room awash in soft, yellow light. I was curled on the couch with a half-finished glass of rose, the noise of the world dimmed outside. And then I realized I could no longer remember the last time I actually laughed. Not a genuine laugh that lifted my chest, as opposed to the polite, hollow ones reserved for family dinners. That realization stared back at me like a mirror, and I didn't know what to do with it. I married Daniel because he made me feel safe. After years spent riding the violent waves of toxic relationships, heartbreaks that left me hollow, and lovers who thrived on chaos, Daniel was like anchoring in a still bay after a relentless storm. He was consistent, steady, predictable in a way that felt like rescue. He had a quiet smile and a patient way of speaking that never rushed, never interrupted. He worked as an accountant, loved spreadsheets and color-coded calendars, and planned our weekends with the same devotion he applied to balancing budgets. When he held my hand for the first time, it wasn't electric, but it was warm, reassuring, as if to say, "You're safe now." For a while, safety was enough. More than enough. It felt like peace. No late-night fights, no disappearing acts, no emotional blackmail. Instead, there were Sunday dinners with soft jazz playing in the background, the smell of rosemary chicken wafting through our small kitchen. Daniel took care of things, the bills, the car maintenance, the laundry folded into neat squares. He remembered to water the philodendron I kept forgetting about, and he always left clean towels for me after my long shifts at the clinic. In that calm, I found a kind of healing. The absence of pain felt like joy. I convinced myself that love didn't have to be passionate to be real. That perhaps love was this gentle, quiet companionship. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that stillness turned into stagnation. Our conversations dwindled into the logistics of life. What to buy at the grocery store, who would call the plumber, whose turn it was to pay the electric bill. The long, curious talks we used to have on the porch faded away, replaced by the hum of the dishwasher and the light clinking of cutlery in silence. Our kisses goodnight became mere rituals, lips brushing like strangers saying hello in an elevator. The way he touched me felt practiced, obligatory, like we were following a routine, not each other. I told myself it was normal. 10 years together changes people. Life gets busy. Jobs drain you. Passion evolves into partnership, and perhaps that was the goal. But some nights, lying in bed while the ceiling fan spun above us, I felt more alone than I ever did in my worst breakups. I began noticing other couples on the sidewalk laughing, teasing, holding hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. There was one young pair I saw every Thursday on my walk home. They'd be sitting on the same park bench, their heads leaned close, whispering secrets behind shared smiles. I envied them, a raw ache in my chest that I tried to dismiss. I had everything I thought I wanted: a solid marriage, a cozy home, a man who never raised his voice or made me cry. I should have felt grateful. I should have felt complete. But instead, I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching it unfold from behind a pane of glass I didn't know was there. I was fading, not from heartbreak, but from the slow erosion of meaning. The safety that once saved me had begun to feel like a prison, one I had helped build, brick by careful brick. And though I didn't know it then, that quiet ache was the beginning of everything unraveling. When Ryan moved in, I thought I knew what to expect. He was Daniel's teenage son from a previous marriage, and I braced myself for the cold front of adolescence. I imagined grunts for greetings, closed bedroom doors, silent breakfasts soaked in awkwardness, and a lingering sense of being an intruder in his already fractured world. But life has a way of surprising you just when you're certain it won't. From the start, Ryan dismantled all my assumptions. He was quiet, yes, but not distant. Thoughtful, but never withdrawn. He brought his dishes to the sink without a word. He wiped down the counter without being asked. He moved through the house not like a storm, but like a gentle breeze, present, but never overwhelming. I remember the first time he asked me, "Long day?" I almost didn't respond. unsure if he was just being polite. But then he looked at me and really looked at me, and I realized he was genuinely listening. Not out of obligation, not out of politeness, but from a place of care that caught me off guard. At first, his kindness felt incidental, a teenager being polite. But over time, those small gestures added up. He would suggest a feel-good show when I looked worn down, or silently join me at the dinner table, setting his phone aside and giving me his undivided attention. It was such a simple thing. Yet in a world that so often demanded my invisibility, his presence felt like a spotlight. He noticed things no one else did. A new shade of cream in my sweater. The way I'd tucked my hair differently that day. "Looks nice," he'd say, without the weight of expectation or flirtation. It wasn't romantic. It was something rarer. It was human. For the first time in years, someone saw me not as a partner, not as a step anything, not as a background fixture in someone else's life, but simply as a person. And that seeing cracked something open in me. There was one evening quiet, unremarkable in most ways, when we sat across from each other eating leftover pasta. We were talking about nothing and everything, and something he said made me laugh. Not a polite chuckle. A real, belly-deep laugh that made my eyes water. I hadn't heard that sound from myself in years. Ryan's eyes lit up, and he leaned forward, his voice warm and low, almost reverent. "You should do that more. It's good on you." In that moment, something inside me flared unexpectedly and unmistakably alive. Not attraction, not confusion, but recognition. It was the feeling of being validated without having to explain why I needed it. The feeling of being seen and not judged. It was a small light in the fog I hadn't realized I'd been living in. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself feel it. Whatever it was real. It mattered. And it reminded me that somewhere beneath the roles, the masks, the quiet compromises of adulthood, I was still there. And someone had finally noticed. It happened on a Thursday. The air was thick with that kind of quiet that only settles when the world forgets you're awake. Daniel was out of town, gone on a corporate retreat at some lake house up north. The house, in his absence, felt cavernous, like a cathedral left empty after Mass. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the walls, seemed amplified in his absence. I couldn't sleep. I told myself it was the wine, or maybe the silence, but in truth, I think I was already uneasy, restless in a way I hadn't fully acknowledged yet. Around midnight, I slipped out of bed, barefoot and half asleep, in search of water. The hallway was dimly lit, soft shadows flickering from the streetlight outside. I passed Ryan's door, expecting nothing but silence. But then I heard it, a sound barely there. Soft. Intimate. At first, I thought it was the wind until I realized it wasn't. It was a voice. A woman's voice. Warm. Breathless. The kind of voice that wasn't just speaking, it was murmuring. Whispering things meant only for one other person. I stopped. His door was open just slightly. A crack wide enough to see through, not wide enough to be an invitation. And yet I looked. Ryan was on his bed, shirtless, lit by the faint blue glow of his phone screen. He didn't see me. He was somewhere else entirely, eyes fixed on the device, lips parted just barely. And from the phone, her voice continued a private monologue of affection, or maybe seduction. I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. The scene felt too raw, too real. I froze, caught in some strange gravity between curiosity and guilt. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but something deeper. Something I didn't recognize at first, something almost primal. And then it hit me. Shame. Not just for looking, but for feeling something I shouldn't. A rush of heat. A strange flutter low in my stomach. I backed away quietly, one hand brushing the wall to steady myself. I returned to my room like someone retreating from the edge of a cliff they hadn't realized they were standing on. But once I lay in bed, the damage was done. I was trembling not from cold, but from the knowledge that something had shifted. It wasn't just what I had seen. It was how I had felt seeing it. There was something alive inside me now, raw, stirred, and impossible to ignore. a part of me I didn't know existed, until that night. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting golden patterns on the floor. I moved about the house like a ghost, quiet, deliberate, invisible. My footsteps were muffled by the thick silence that now lived between Ryan and me. I scrubbed countertops that were already clean, rearranged the books on the shelf, dialed old friends I hadn't spoken to in months to avoid being in the same room with him. And yet, fate had a cruel sense of humor. Every time I passed him in the hallway, something inside me stirred. I caught the faint scent of his cologne, cool, citrusy, with a trace of something warm and earthy underneath. It clung to the air like memory. His voice, low and easy after soccer practice, floated from the kitchen or the porch, and I found myself pausing to listen. I watched how his shoulders moved under his hoodie, how his eyes flicked toward me and then away when he thought I wasn't looking. I began to change subtly, then more boldly. At first, it was just brushing my hair more carefully. Then it was lipstick with only a hint of color, but enough to feel like a secret. I told myself it was for me, that I needed to feel confident again. But deep down, I knew I was lying. I wanted him to notice. I needed him to see me not as a roommate, not as a friend's sister, but as something else. Something more. He never brought up that night. Neither did I. But something had shifted. It wasn't just the silence, it was what lived inside the silence. The charged stillness that throbbed like a second heartbeat whenever we were near each other. A glance that lasted a second too long. The way my skin prickled when he brushed past me in the kitchen. The ache in my stomach when I heard him laugh from another room. There were moments I wanted to scream, to break the quiet and ask him what he felt, what he remembered. But fear held me back. The fear that I had imagined it all. That I was just a girl making stories out of shadows and glances. But deep inside, something had awakened. A hunger, a dangerous curiosity. And no matter how much I tried to silence it, it grew louder with each passing day. Daniel came home the way he always did, present in body, absent in soul. His keys clattered onto the console table, his shoes dragged across the floor. And his gaze never quite met mine. The silence between us wasn't new, but tonight it was especially suffocating, like a storm that refused to break. We exchanged cold, brittle things that snapped midair. The fight had no anchor, no real subject. Just a volley of discontent, accusations unspoken, yet thick in the air. And then, true to form, he slammed the back door behind him, taking whatever warmth had existed with him. I sank into the couch as if the cushions could swallow the ache blooming in my chest. The wine glass in my hand trembled slightly, red liquid shimmering under the flickering kitchen light. Tears came, not the kind that sobbed or screamed, but the quiet kind, like rain against a window. I didn't want to feel them anymore. I didn't want to feel anything. Then came the sound of footsteps. Ryan stepped in quietly, like he had done 100 times before, but this time was different. He didn't speak at first. He just sat beside me, his presence neither imposing nor distant. The silence wrapped around us again, but it was no longer suffocating. It was waiting. After what felt like both an instant and an eternity, his voice broke the hush. "You saw me that night, didn't you?" There was no point in lying. I didn't even try. I looked at him, expecting shame, maybe regret, but there was none. Just a calm, steady kind of knowing. A compassion that made my chest ache more than any accusation could. It wasn't judgment in his eyes. It was something gentler, recognition. The way a person looks at another who's been treading the same water, trying not to drown. He reached for my hand. A simple act. His fingers barely grazed mine. Tentative, unsure. But the warmth of it, God. The warmth was more than I had felt in years. It felt like sunlight in winter. "This is wrong," I whispered, my voice a thread unraveling. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. His reply was a question, quiet but echoing. "Then why are we both still here?" I had no answer. None that could justify it. None that could explain why I didn't pull away. Our eyes held each other, and something inside me cracked open. We leaned in, not pulled by seduction, but by gravity, the kind that exists between two lonely planets orbiting the same ache. When our lips met, it wasn't fire. It wasn't fury. It was recognition. It was breaking and amending all at once. We weren't seeking pleasure. We were searching for proof that we still existed, that somewhere in the hollow silence of our lives, there was still someone who saw us. Then we stopped. No confessions. No promises. Just breath and silence, and the heavy understanding of what had just passed between us. I stood up. The room was suddenly too small, too loud with the beat of my heart. I murmured something about needing air, needing space, needing something I couldn't name. I walked away. In the bathroom, under the cold fluorescence, I stared at myself. The woman in the mirror looked like me, but she wasn't. Her eyes were wider, her face softer. She wasn't guilty yet. She was free. For the first time in years, she was unburdened. And that terrified me. Relief curled in my chest, dark, dangerous, and honest. Like a dying woman stumbling upon an oasis and knowing she might drink, even if it kills her. Morning arrived, stiff and unremarkable, wrapped in a veil of normalcy that felt almost cruel. The sky outside was a flat gray, and the air in the kitchen hung still, like a held breath. I stood by the counter, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. The hum of the machine was the only sound, steady and oblivious. I poured a cup, letting the warmth rest in my palms. The silence between Ryan and me wasn't just quiet, it was loaded, deliberate. But strangely, it wasn't hostile. It was the kind of silence that forms not from anger, but from resignation. A shared, silent understanding that whatever had held us together had quietly come undone. We didn't speak of it, not the kiss, not the weight of what followed, not the words we didn't say. Days began to blur. I'd wake, go to work, come home. He'd be there sometimes, sometimes not. A week passed. Then one evening, he stood by the window, his back to me, and said he was moving back in with his mother. His voice was calm, almost apologetic, as if seeking forgiveness he didn't expect to receive. I nodded. That was all. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Maybe because part of me had already let go. Quietly, in the moments between his silence and mine. On his final morning, he lingered at the doorway. He placed one hand on the frame, turned his head slightly, not all the way, just enough to let his words find me. Take care of yourself, he said, soft and low, like it might not matter. Then he walked out. No hugs. No dramatic farewell. Just that. Just the end. And now, I float. I drift through my life like someone living underwater, everything muffled, everything slow. I laugh at my coworkers' jokes. I answer emails. I smile in meetings. I've become an expert at pretending. But beneath that surface, something's coming undone. A quiet unraveling. I feel it in the pit of my stomach, in the hollowness of evenings, in the weight of my own silence when the lights go out. I keep asking myself, was I just lonely? Was that all it was? Did I mistake a moment of vulnerability for something more? Or was that fleeting, imperfect encounter the first time I touched something real, something raw truth, maybe in years? I don't know. I really don't. But something broke. Maybe it was my marriage. Maybe the image I'd held of myself, all those years dutiful, reliable, unshakable. Or maybe it was just the illusion that I was content, that I was enough, or that I had enough. Whatever it was, it's gone now, and I'm left sifting through the pieces. And the worst part? I'm still not sure I'd undo it, even if I could. This story isn't about judgment, it's about the ache of being unseen, and what happens when someone finally looks. It's about the blur between safety and numbness, between mother, wife, and woman with buried needs. And it's about that moment, the heartbeat, when something you never expected illuminates what you've lost. I hope this version connects with your vision, maintaining the tone and arc, deepening the emotional texture, adding tension at the start, and weaving in sensory detail. If you'd like further expansions or adjustments, perhaps exploring Daniel's perspective, the toll on the household, or what happens next, just say the word.